Either way, it was a 10 out of 10 DLC, and I never buy DLC.
Nice. I saw you had a bunch up there. Do you want to answer the question now? Because we did have somebody write in about Elden Ring, or do you want to save it for the end? It's up to you.
No, let's get it now.
Okay, so hey, this is a little unorthodox, but we'll just jump ahead because this ties in perfectly. So this comes from Demon Slayer 88, and because you were just doing all your DLC. It says, with Elden Ring DLC out and seemingly doing well, some people complain about the $40 price tag. Thoughts? So is that a big concern right now? I mean, 40 bucks, it sounded like you were getting bang for your buck, but what's the big issue? What are people complaining about?
I don't know what it is. There was a lot of people just saying it's expensive in general because it's almost like the price of a game. But I felt
outside looking in, it does sound expensive to me as someone who doesn't buy DLC, because to me that is a game. But we bought games that are $40 and are full games. So yeah, I don't know.
And I paid more for games that are a lot shorter. So, I mean, if that's the way you're trying to justify it, I think that it's totally worth it. Because I'd seen that question, so I even wrote down a few things of, you know, what you're kind of getting or compared to other things. Like, I don't understand how you're comparing it. But I've seen people in YouTube comments, on Reddit, just posts, in Facebook comments, like, oh, I'm not paying for this, I'll get it later, yada, yada. And I don't kind of understand the mindset, and maybe it's I obviously we're in a blessed position, but for a couple things, I want to say what stands out the most to me, and I think what makes DLC worth it, especially someone who doesn't buy DLC, it comes down to two things: timing and content. And what I mean by timing, most importantly for me, is how long it comes out after something. And I don't mean it as like, oh, I beat that game, I don't want to jump back in. As in, let's say this game came out at the start of this year and they just put this out now, I'd feel, I don't want to say ripped off, but why couldn't that have been part of the main game? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you have DLC that's way too close to something towards its launch date, people always feel a little burned, like, well, why couldn't that have been a part of the game? Or clearly you're already working on that, why didn't you just launch with it? So I think that's a big part of it, and that's something to take into context too. This game came out in 2022, so it's been 2 years that they've been working on it. And I even put, and again, it came out 2 10s. And I also wrote down another example. It'd be like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk came out in 2020, and then it took them 3 years before they dropped that Phantom Liberty that also reviewed very well too.
Did you get the price of that one? Did you find out what Cyberpunk was?
Cyberpunk was $30, so $10 less than this, but still in that kind of same ballpark. And as far as content, from my understanding for both, it feels almost like a whole game. I can't speak to Phantom Liberty because we didn't get it. That is something we've been wanting to get, and it wasn't even a price point issue for us. It was more, there's just other things at that time that we were kind of playing.
Snowball.
But if you just want base content stuff, I just wrote down a couple quick little facts here for myself. That Elden Ring added 11 main bosses, so that's not counting all the little bosses that you'll encounter in random areas. I think it said there was upwards of like 80, because some of them are just like mini bosses, but 11 main bosses. Dark Souls 1, which, you know, that's a beloved game, launched with 13 main bosses. And if you're not just cruising through them, this map is big. I'd say it's probably the size of maybe like Dark Souls 1. I feel like I could finish Dark Souls 1 faster than this. I think the only reason that this would feel short is if you followed a guide on where to go and just ran through the main story. Because running through the main story, I think it's only like 4 bosses, not 4, like 5 bosses to beat the DLC. But then you're not, that's just an A to B line. Then you're not even experiencing anything else on the map. And that's the beauty of these games, is getting lost in this sort of world. And it also added new weapons, new play styles, so some of those weapons came in different styles. There's even like now you can put things on your hands or even just fight barehanded, and your dude's doing like kung fu, like ninja style stuff. And I just want to put it out there. I mean, there's far worse things you can spend $40 on, and this isn't the same as DLC, but for $40 with Star Wars Outlaws, you get to play the game 3 days early, and their DLC season pass, which as of now I think is 2 missions, one of them involving Jabba the Hutt. So who knows how long that takes, or even what's encompassed in that season pass. And that's before the game even came out, that they're already charging you anything extra. So for something as beloved as this, that was Game of the Year, to put out the content like this that people also reviewed in tens, I'd say it was well worth the money. And me playing with other people, since if I would have, you played it before, I have to beat the boss, then we have to do it for you. I essentially beat the game 3 times, almost 4, because I was playing it with my brothers and a friend too, so I more than got my money's worth.
Yeah, because the way I gotta hear it too is like, this isn't something you're just gonna play once. You are gonna rebuild your guy, and it's FromSoft that does this. Yes. It's like, and you also gotta remember, this is a studio that gives out quality every time, and from what I was kind of looking at is, the DLC was like the same size as the main game, meaning that it's just as big, and if not, at least in terms of quality of what you're getting. I could see 40 on paper, especially when you compare it to something like Cyberpunk. Maybe sounds a bit high, but I think you get what you pay for, and if the quality is there and it's getting 10s, then I'm not sure what you could be too stiff about. And the main thing, I guess, from a gamer side of point of collecting, I've just heard that trophies and achievements were a big thing that people were hoping were there, but I heard FromSoft doesn't do that anyway with DLC, so
I don't think that they've done that with any of them. And sometimes what they do, when I hate, is like when I did I think the Dark Souls 2 remastered, you had to get some of the DLC stuff because that would encompass the base game achievements too, and it's like, well, now I'm just doing all this extra stuff for whatever. But the map size wasn't as big as the original one, but it's still a huge map. But I love that point. The quality is there for the main bosses that are there. They're individual. It's not like it's a reused boss, because they do have some bosses, like, like a tree sentinel, well, they'll have 2 of them instead of fighting 1 or something like that out there. I love them front to back, and some of them even introduce people's new favorite bosses, people to cosplay as. I've seen nothing but people love it. And what it does for the lore, I thought was insanely good too, because it completely changed people's theories. And I do want to point out too that it's not like they just made this DLC like, okay, here, we're just going to put this DLC out and anybody could do it. You had to beat a certain boss in this game, and I believe before the DLC came out, they said only 32% of people had actually beaten that boss. I think even IGN said that their stuff wasn't going to be ready in time because they hadn't even, whoever was doing it, hadn't gotten past that boss yet either. So you had to beat a boss that was actually really hard, and he's not on the main path. He's someone you have to go out of your way to do just to experience this. So this is not just for every Joe Schmo. This is for the people like me that want to explore, want to experience something, and not just making a zipline A to B to say that I played it. Nice. Like, no, I experienced it.
Hey, there's Elden Ring. Now, definitely go play it, and all of its DLC intact. Now, I know they're making the bundle pack, which I think is going to be, is it $80 total if you rebuy the game with the DLC? Is that the new bundle, or is it?
I didn't look at it. I think that it was, and even still, it's still
makes it $40.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's still a good price for it.
Yeah, sounds good to me.